Viva Piñata is a beloved game from my childhood that I never actually managed to finish in a way that I'd be satisfied with. If you've never heard of it before, the goal of the game is really simple. You have a nice little garden that you fill with plants and flowers and all sorts of cool things, which then attracts various piñatas to it. So today I'm going to fix the mistakes of the past, play Viva Piñata for 100 days, and see if I can get all the piñata in that time. Will I succeed? We'll keep watching to find out. So day one started and instantly just whoa, tidal wave of nostalgia. I met up with Leafos, who's kind of like your guide at the start of the game. She shows you how to move the camera and all that, and she gives you your first few items like a shovel and a watering can and grass packet, all sorts of things. You know, the gardener's arsenal. I started digging into the soil, and that brought about the very first piñata of the game. I also started sprinkling grass seeds everywhere like a toddler let loose with a bag of flour, which brought a Syrupant out of hiding. The worm then decided that my dirt was of the finest caliber, and yes, he would indeed be staying in my garden. I then got introduced to the first villager in the game. There is actually quite a lot of them. This is Willy the Builder, ha ha ha, funny name, yes. He offered to build my worms a little house so they could romance, but before I could do that, I had to do this mini game, which all of them kind of have like a look that's dependent on the piñata you're romancing. This one's really simple, it looks like a worm. I think the taffly just looks like a pile of shit. But very, very in keeping with what the piñata is. I succeeded in the minigame, as hard as it was, and after they went back to their little house and did the proper romance dance, which is very, very cute, an egg was delivered by the character Storkos. The egg soon hatched, and Leafos deemed me ready to nurture yet more life in the form of a seed. I picked the left one because left is best, as all left-handed people know, and it turned out to be a turnip seed.
Move, children! Vámonos!
Day one was slowly coming to an end, but the night did bring my first nocturnal piñata in the form of a moth drop. We're on to day 2 already, and the game assumed by now that I understood the basics. It unlocked the clock and experience petals for me at the top right of the screen, which you'll get loads of by doing pretty much everything in this game. Like if you get a piñata, there's experience. If you change the colour of the piñata, there's experience. Everything. I got enough petals to get to level 2, which introduced Psydoof, a nerdy looking dude with so great an obsession for seeds he actually changed his name to reflect that. It was only early days, and yet because I was growing so much stuff at once with all the seeds and everything else I got, I was constantly being bombarded by piñata. There was a swarm of bugs that turned up because of all the flowers I grew, and then a marshmallow turned up to eat the turnip that I'd only just grown, you little git. But then, just as soon as he became a resident, he was horrifically dismembered by a visiting Syrupant. Yeah, piñata life is very cruel. And then we got the first troublemaker of the game, the sour Shelly Bean. So all the sours were once good piñata, but they must have eaten some sour candy, which made them go all evil. I like sour sweets, so I maybe that makes me evil, I don't know. They can, however, be turned good again by fulfilling their requirements, just like the other piñata. I was then introduced to Lottie, owner of the Cost-A-Lot store. She has like all the really nifty stuff like new seeds, fertilizer, romance sweets if you want to get previously romanced piñata in the mood. Anyway, I bought a firebrand from her because the moth drop that was visiting wanted it, and with that, day 2 came to a close. Day 3 brought with it about 4 billion more piñata introductions and a couple of villagers to boot. By far the most best and wonderful and amazing is Gretchen. She not only looks, oh my god, just so gorgeous, but she can also hunt down piñata species that I've already tamed, so to speak. That doesn't sound that exciting when you already own them, but if you're going for 100% in this game and you want the Master Romancer Awards, which require you to have 7 of one species in the garden, she is a godsend. And then there's the egotistical Jardinero.
I never needed help when I used to run this garden. You've reached the stage I got to on my 3rd day in the garden. I like the way you keep trying. Even though you don't have the natural talent that I did.
Don't provoke me to anger.
As egotistical as he is, he does have some uses, like giving you shovel upgrades, garden space, and he even gives you pieces of a tower of sour once you've tamed a sour. And speaking of sours, I did actually buy an apple seed from Lottie for the sour Shelly Bean, and once it ate it, it cocooned itself and morphed back into a much friendlier, easier on the eyes piñata. Jardinero then declared me an experienced gardener, despite the fact I'd only been playing for about 20 minutes by this point. I remember this game taking longer as a kid. He gave me a new shovel head, which allowed me to dig a pond. I, of course, fashioned it into an appropriate shape. It attracted a lickertoad and a newtgat. And then I was reminded of how bad the AI can be in this game when Leafos declared she was stuck. I don't know how, there's a massive gap she could walk around, and the best bit was when I finally deleted the firebrand, she walked round the house anyway.
I look like I give a fuck?
The early hours of day 5 brought a sour sherbet, which is a nasty little sour that will walk up to your piñata and bite them and make them very sick. Being sick in Viva Piñata, as it is in real life, is not very nice. Luckily, you can send out Doc Patchingo to go and cure them.
Oh, cranberries.
If you don't do it quick enough though, this creepy fecker called Dastardos will float into your garden and smash that piñata to pieces. As if I wasn't traumatized enough by all the sours. I still wasn't done with introductions by this point. Miss Betula owned Paper Pets, where I could buy domesticated piñata and silly outfits for all of my guys. But the Tinker could turn items into something new, and then there was Arthur Stout, who owned an inn where I could employ a small army of workers to do things for me in my garden. It was all getting a little bit overwhelming by this point with all these introductions, but there was no time to slow down because I just got my first garden space upgrade. And then the AI issues came back with a vengeance when I tried romancing some tafflies, who did everything in their power to avoid me clicking on them. This is actually a big problem with all of the flying piñata. I did originally start this game with the intention of trying to get to 100%, which meant the Master Romancer awards. These flying feckers just killed me. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And then, of course, day 8 was filled with yet more issues. I'd grown some thistleweeds in this game because the local fudge hog wanted them, but the problem is all the weeds have negative traits, so to speak. Doc Patchingo must be making a fortune off my garden. Day 9 did bring some good tidings though. I got Bart to tinker a pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern for the sour sherbet, and he changed back into this adorable little rectangle with wings. He's just so cute, I love him. And then, because my garden couldn't go one day without the threat of destruction, a sour crawler turned up to take the place of the sour sherbet. I quickly sorted it with a bird bath and a bottle of honey that was transformed into medicine, and then I was rewarded with a piñata that didn't look much less evil than its sour counterpart. The ruffians also made themselves known. Short, angry little dudes that just love nothing more than causing destruction. The ruffians were followed by Ivor the Beggar, who hobbled over and begged me to give him money. I felt generous and offered him a whopping 1,000 coins, which was apparently enough to turn his life around, both figuratively and literally. The next few days were just this revolving door of piñata species coming and going, and of course there was a sour not far behind. By this point I was just zooming through levels like phew phew phew. It didn't take long to get the second and final garden space upgrade because of this. I finally got an arachnid visit on day 22, but I was still trying to get the Taffly Master Romancer award, and so I had no choice but to commit piñata-cide.
You didn't see anything.
And for my act of brutality, the piñata gods punished me by sending yet another sour to ruin my day. Now by this point, the abundance of plants and the produce they were making was getting a little bit too difficult to maintain by myself, so I got Willie to build a helper home and then headed to Arthur's Inn to hire some underlings. The sour Maca-Raccoon came visiting, but I had enough Master Romancer awards by this point to appease it, and coupled with the sacrifice of a poor Cluckles, it became one of the derpiest looking piñata in my garden. Naturally, the removal of one sour brings another, and now I had to contend with a sour crocodile who would constantly pick fights with my workers. And then on day 28, the big bad guy himself, Professor Pester, stormed into my garden to cause mayhem. A walking bag of dicks, his most favourite hobby is going up to your most valuable piñata and smashing it to pieces if you don't bribe him with chocolate coins in time. On day 33, the sour Mallow-wolf turned up. It just never ends, does it? It would scare any visitors out of my garden, which was obviously going to be a bit of an issue, so both he and that pesky sour crocodile met their ends by my shovel quite a few times. Obviously this isn't a permanent solution, so I set about sorting their requirements. Sour Mallow-wolf would need to eat a pixie, which came from a freak romance between a raspberry and a swanana, and the sour crocodile could then eat the swananas once their job was done. It was the perfect plan. Easier said than done, however, as the swanana is particularly fussy. I also had to romance the raspberry and the swanana separately before they could romance each other, so this would take a few days. For now, I carried on tending to my garden, growing fanciful plants such as the gem tree, and meeting more funky pinata. This included the majestic Eagler, which wouldn't even consider being a resident in my garden until I had an oak tree and a buzzenge. Where the buzzenge came from, I have no clue, because I don't think I even saw it as a kid. I had to go to the internet for the answer, which I was trying to avoid, but yeah, I won't be doing this in 100 days if I don't make use of the internet at some point. It told me I had to make a spearmint, eat a buttercup flower, which would turn it into a canary. The canary would then attract the buzzenge. I did need another evolution as well. There was a passing dragonfly that wouldn't stay in my garden unless he won a fight against a red hot. The internet told me to send a taffly through a firebrand and then immediately douse it with water. Yeah, I can see why younger me never worked that one out. There was a final addition to the Sour Gang, thank God, in the form of the Sour Bomboon, who loved nothing more than causing animosity between my piñata. On day 43, I tamed a Fizzly Bear with copious amounts of honey and fir cones, and just as I was thinking, oh, he's a big boy, isn't he? An Elephantilla came plodding out of the jungle. He wanted either 16 blackberries, gooseberries, monkey nuts or corn in the garden just to visit, and then he would need to eat 4 each of those. The piñata requirements were getting very steep, which necessitated a good tidy up to make room for all the other piñata and items I would actually need. I sent Bart to tinker some toadstools into mushrooms for the sour profitamol that had been plaguing my garden for weeks now, and he promptly changed back into a giant jelly bean of sorts. The Sour Bomboon would be a bit tougher though. It needed to lose a fight against a member of the Serpent family. While there was a chance my lowly snake could win, I decided to kill 2 piñatas with 1 stick by working on a new evolution. I romanced a Serpent as normal, but once the egg was delivered, I would wait for its final 3rd biggest bounce and then hit it with a shovel. Out popped this double-headed monstrosity known as a Twinger Snap, and now I just had to wait for the Sour Bomboon to return. I was past the halfway mark and things were going pretty smoothly. With the help of the workers and a steady stream of income from selling piñatas and plants, it really felt like nothing could faze me by this point. And then it arrived. I'm not a big fan of the Rorio. I think it's a really cool piñata and, it's the king of the jungle and all that, but its requirements are just so steep and my garden is so limited on space by this point that it's just a nightmare to get sorted. And then the next few days were just a blur of activity. An intense staring contest saw the Sour Bomboon beaten by the Twinger Snap and turned good, and then I welcomed new residents in the form of the Squazzle, Arachnid, Elephantilla, and this suave Cinnamonkey.
Quit that!
And finally, on day 64, I got round to romancing that Raspberry and Swanana, creating this abomination known as a Pigsy. I allowed the remaining sours to roam free without fear of being whacked by my shovel, and a few sacrifices later, I was finally done with the sours. Oh! The joyous day was topped off by the appearance of one of the rarest piñata in the game, the Galagugu. It wouldn't appear until I dealt with all the sours, and its visit requirements were just as bad as the Rorios. The Galagugu also expected me to hire a watchling if I wanted it to become a resident, which I didn't understand because the watchling's job is to chase any visitors out the garden, including the Galagugu. And about now is when the game started to get really grindy. I set about acquiring the Zumbug, which was an ordeal in its own. I had to get a Pinocchi from Paper Pet to attract a Horstachio, get the Horstachio to stay by feeding it 8 apples, and then once it had finally become a resident, I had to feed it a blackberry and a daisy flower to evolve it into a Zumbug. On top of all this, I can't have these equine species mixed in because they all hate each other, and if they see each other, they will fight. While waiting for Gretchen to fetch me the rest, I got Willy to build me a mine. I employed the Diggerlings to go in and fetch stuff, and on occasion they would come back with valuable gems. Most of the time though, it was just pieces of dirt. Thank you guys, I'm glad I gave you that bonus. But what I really wanted from the mine was even rarer. I'll get to that in a second. 16 days after first spotting the Rorio, it proudly strode through my garden. Its favourite thing to do was to accomplish only one thing on its resident list, and then disappear back into the jungle not to be seen for a few more days. This wouldn't be so bad if you didn't have to fulfill the visit requirements every time a piñata turns up, So if the Rorio ate one donut and then left, I had to replace that donut, else it wouldn't enter my garden again. And on top of that, the game tracks 2 of the same species at once, so the next Rorio to turn up won't necessarily be the one with halfway done requirements. Space in my garden was limited with so many donuts and Zumbug running around, and it was about to get even smaller with the arrival of a mysterious egg from the mines. This is what I was after, and knowing what exactly it is, I bought a Cluckles from Paper Pets and directed it towards the egg. And out popped the rarest pinata in the game, the Dragonash. Unlike other pinata, this one would stay a baby unless I fed it 4 specific items. This included a Salamango, which is the evolved form of a newtgat after it eats a chili, so another evolution to get done. And if you thought the Elephantilla was big... Progress from this day forward dropped to an absolute crawl. The pinata I still needed seemed to be appearing less often just to mess with me, and the pinata populations I had to maintain for them were causing issues too. Smaller pinata, absolutely fed up with being constantly trampled by their larger garden mates, would become so unhappy they'd leave my garden for greener, less crowded pastures. This included the Galagugu, which was really hilarious because he went out with all the clothing I just given him.
Respect the drip, Karen.
It was then I realised, to my absolute horror, that I was missing a bunch of pinata, only discovered when I checked the species list on the game's wiki. Apparently there's no way to do this in the game, you only get the logs of the pinata when you first see them. So yeah, how are you supposed to know which ones you're missing? Thankfully, most of the missing ones were easy to obtain. The Paper Pets were just a simple case of throwing money at Miss Petula, and 2 of the evolution pinata just needed a random item to eat. The foreheads took the longest because it required a Twinger Snap romance and then another egg beating.
The fuck is that?
The normal 2 pinata, the Tunicorn and the Chippopotamus, would need a bit more work. I started with the Chippopotamus, which saw my beloved garden turned into a swamp that Shrek would be proud of. About 14 million plants later, it finally became a resident. And then it was the fabled Tunicorn's turn. This is when I found out I needed the Horstachio Master Romancer, something I wish I'd known before I turned them all into Zumbugs. Because of the equine rivalry problem, I thought building a fence to contain the Horstachios would be a really good idea. Unfortunately, it worked about as well as a chocolate teapot. Regardless, the Master Romancer Award was eventually achieved, thank goodness for Gretchen, and the Tunicorn showed up. I used the tried and true method of throwing food at its face, and on day 91 it had stuffed itself on enough geological treats to become a resident. Having caught up, it was back to watching and waiting for the Eagler and Rorio. I had so little time left by this point, but for the next few days I saw no sign of either. It was only on day 96 when the Rorio showed up again, but it just spent its time mocking me from the border's edge before strutting back into the wilderness. Day 97 saw the Eagler pop in for exactly 1 buzz end and then leave just as swiftly as it came. And then on day 98 I had a tiny little crisis. So the Eagler turned up and it finally got around to eating the last buzz end it needed. That should have been it, but nothing was happening. And this is when I found out that trees do in fact die in Viva Piñata. What bloody good timing. With just over a day left, all I could do was race to Lottie for an oak seed and pray it would grow fast enough. I think this is the one time in the game I was grateful that the other pinata turned up. This Eagler's buzz end requirements hadn't been fulfilled, meaning it would be preoccupied with attacking and eating them. It became a tense few minutes of me watching this oak tree grow at the most painstakingly slow speed possible. I mean, you know, it's faster than real life, but in Viva Piñata this is slow. All I could do was hope the buzzenges could keep the Eagler busy, and I prayed to the pinata gods for this one act of mercy. Oh my god! Now, I would like to say I finished this challenge with a bang and snagged myself a Rorio. Yeah, I would like to say that. Unfortunately, I'd run out of time. I won't lie and say I wasn't a little bit disappointed that I didn't finish my goal.
Hello.
I did play in a very inefficient way, which didn't help. My garden was horribly designed, not planned out at all, and I wasted so much time on those master romances. But while I never did catch that elusive Rorio, I definitely accomplished more than I ever had as a kid. And in spite of some annoying pinata requirements and dodgy AI, it truly was a joy to relive such a beloved part of my childhood. Viva Piñata is this wonderful, quirky, weird, amazing game, and I just really hope that one day it gets the remake treatment that I think it deserves. Anyway, this has been Psydoof. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!
Ouch!